So this is the beginning of my video series about Ayn Rand. Her most interesting contribution is her philosophy of Objectivism. It is a system of beliefs that cannot change. It's basically the answer to what people object to about moral relativism. My understanding of Objectivism is the reason why I do not particularly care for modern-day libertarians and American conservatives. This framework of ideas has contributed greatly to those ideologies. Because I don't believe many of its central tenets don't hold any water, then many of the right's ideologies have no appeal to me. Objectivism's central tenets are that reality exists independently of consciousness, that human beings have direct contact with reality through sense perception, that one can attain objective knowledge from perception through the process of concept formation and inductive logic, that the proper moral purpose of one's life is the pursuit of one's own happiness, or rational self-interest, that the only social system consistent with this morality is one that displays full respect for individual rights embodied in laissez-faire capitalism, and that the role of art in human life is to transform humans' metaphysical ideas by selective reproduction of reality into a physical form, a work of art that one can comprehend and to which one can respond to emotionally. Before I begin to discuss any of my ideas about Rand and Objectivism, I have to define something called rational self-interest. Many people will automatically view this as inherently bad because selfishness in society is frowned upon. The way I have come to understand what rational actions are is through the studies of a mathematical model called game theory. Understanding this is imperative to understanding why being a rational actor isn't always considered a bad thing. At the end of the day, we all want what is best for ourselves. Please bear with me. Game theory is incredibly complex, and I'm going to introduce its concepts. I hope that it sparks your interest and curiosity to explore it further beyond I will. So what is game theory? Game theory is the study of mathematical models of conflict and cooperation between intelligent, rational decision makers. Game theory is mainly used in economics, political science, and psychology, as well as in logic and computer science. Originally, it addressed zero-sum games in which one person's gains will result in losses for the other participants. Today, game theory applies to a wide range of behavioral relations and is now an umbrella term for the science of logical decision-making in humans, animals, and computers. So, why is game theory so important? Game theory helps to explain why rational individuals would choose to cooperate with each other. This piggybacks off the rational choice theory, in which it assumes that all people try to actively maximize their advantage in any situation, and therefore are consistently trying to minimize their losses. The theory is based on the idea that all humans base their decisions on rational calculations, act with rationality when choosing, and aim to increase either pleasure or profit for themselves. When we speak about what is rational in this way, you must also keep in mind that this theory does not take into account of an afterlife. If you only had one life to live, then rationally speaking, you would take any action that would give you the best possible outcome every time. To say that this is inherently selfish is kind of missing the point to what a rational individual would want. They would want to always strive for what is in their best interest because they only have one life. Sacrificing yourself to save another is irrational because you would cease to exist, and in the end, if rational decision-making is built upon the idea of the best possible outcome for that individual, death would always be irrational. Now, the prisoner's dilemma is the most basic mathematical formulation for game theory. It is a two-person, one-shot prisoner dilemma game. This means two people are forced to interact with each other, in which cooperation and defection are the only two possible actions that one could take. It is a one-shot scenario because this game is only played once between two individuals. The classical dilemma involves two criminals. Before they were arrested, they jointly committed a crime that carried a high penalty with it, like robbing a bank. They both agreed to never rat each other out. Now, they've both been arrested for another minor crime, destruction of personal property. This new crime has nothing to do with the previous major crime. However, the police have a suspicion that these two people committed both crimes. They have absolutely no evidence connecting either one to the previous major crime. They know if they can get a confession, then it doesn't matter. Either way, the criminals have to be charged with the crime. Now, in order for the scenario to be considered a PD game or a prisoner dilemma game, it must follow the equation that temptation is greater than reward is greater than punishment, which is greater than the sucker's pill. Temptation is the greatest possible payout. Reward being multiple or mutual cooperation between the players. Punishment is mutual defection, in which both players choose not to cooperate with each other, and sucker's pill is the worst possible payout that one can get. In the classic PD game described above, defection is the dominant strategy. This means that there is no reason to cooperate, since it leads towards the worst possible payout every time. If they choose to defect, rational choice, then they avoid the worst possible payout every time. If both prisoners choose to defect, then they will both get 5 years. This payout is much more preferable than the possibility of receiving 10 years if one chooses to cooperate and the other doesn't. Defection is the dominant strategy because it would never lead to the worst possible payout of 10 years. Because the worst possible payout is 10 years, there is no reason for one to unilaterally change their position and not to defect. This is what is called the Nash Equilibrium. But this is not the best payout for all players. In the chart above, if you look at it, one player will either get 0 or 10 years, and the other player will get either 0 or 10 years, or they could either get 5 years. But if we wanted to take into account all players in the game, if they both cooperated, then they would only get 1 year apiece. So the best payout would be to deny all allegations and serve the 1 year jail sentence for the minor crime, thus never admitting to the major crime, and each getting a better payout than a punishment, which is 5 years. Only in this case can the best payout be achieved for all players. Each individual's best payout is to hope that the other player confesses and they deny. Then the individual would walk away as a free man. The criminals are also kept in separate rooms in which they cannot hear the other, nor can they communicate. Some believe that communication would change the way the game is played between two players, but this relies heavily on trust. If one has the option of not serving any time at all, a rational person would lie in order to gain the best possible outcome for themselves. Take a look at this clip about the game show called Golden Balls.
This is serious life-changing money. Your jackpot today is £100,150. You have one final decision to make.
Easy decision.
We're now going to play split or steal. I know you're the last two people in the country I have to explain this to, but you have two final golden balls. You each have a golden ball with the word split written inside. You each have a golden ball with the word steal written inside. You will make a conscious choice of choosing the split or the steal ball. If you both choose the split ball, you split today's jackpot of £100,150 and you go home with £50,075 each. If one of you splits and one of you steals, whoever chooses the steal ball will go home with £100,150. And the person who chooses the split ball goes home with nothing. If you both choose the steal ball, you go home with nothing. Okay.
So the split is considered cooperating and stealing is considered defecting. In order for this to be a prisoner dilemma game, it has to follow the equation that temptation is greater than reward, which is greater than punishment, which is greater than the sucker's pill. Or, in this case, $100,000 is greater than $50,075, which is greater than 0, which is greater than negative $50,075. Where did I get the negative $50,000 from? That's what happens when somebody decides to split and the other player decides to steal. They steal $50,000 from the other player, so it's a negative payout. Now, before I continue with this video clip, I want to point something out. Write down what you think will be the outcome. Who will split or who will steal? Or will they both split or will they both steal? One major objection to the prisoner dilemma game is that if the players are able to communicate with each other, that changes the outcome. Both players would rationally pick to receive the reward, which is mutual cooperation. Or in other words, both players would receive at least $50,000. Let's see this in action.
Before I ask you to choose, I want you to look at your 2 golden balls and make sure you know which is the split ball and which is the steal ball. This is very important. Make sure you don't show each other. Before I ask you to choose, I think you have some talking to do to each other.
Stephen, I just hope they weren't puppy dog tears and they were real tears and you were genuinely going to split that money.
I am going to split this. I just 50,000. I'm just it's unbelievable. I'm very, very happy to go on with 50,000.
You were genuinely going to split the money.
If I stole off you, every single person there would run over here and lynch me.
There was no way I could. I mean, everyone who knew me would just be disgusted if I stole.
When people watch this, they're not going to believe it.
Please.
I can look you in the Sarah. I can look you straight in the eye and tell you I am going to split.
Promise.
I swear down to you, I am going to split.
Okay. This is serious money.
It is.
Sarah, Steve, choose either the split or the steal ball now.
Now that each player has more information, does that change your initial guess at the outcome? Do you think it changed each player's decision? Do you understand how trust and mutual cooperation in this game is playing out? Let's see if you can still guess the right outcome.
Hold it up.
We're going on with 50 grand each. I promise you that.
Split or steal? You never know what's coming in this game. Congratulations, Sarah, you have just won £100,150.
Oh my god, do you see that bitch's face? So, did you guess it correctly? More than likely not, because you used some emotions in your decision making. You were not thinking as a rational individual. See, the rational individual would always want to avoid the worst possible payout, which would be the negative $50,150. The rational individual would want the best possible payout, which is the $100,150. What decision would you have to make in order to avoid the worst possible outcome? You would have to choose steal every time, because choosing split may lead to the worst possible outcome. This is why understanding what being rational is maybe hard for many. They want to believe that the other people will have their best interest in mind as well, that or their own morality would prevent them from doing something bad to another person. They wouldn't be able to live with the guilt of taking all the money. For some people, that would be easy since the guilt was worth $100,000 in the case above. While I do not think Ayn Rand knew about game theory, including it here will hopefully explain why one of her central tenets really isn't really selfishness per se, but that the proper moral purpose of one's life is the pursuit of one's own happiness or rational self-interest. If you really want to understand objectivism, you must understand what Ayn Rand is placing at its core. It's rational self-interest. This is what she measures every response off of. It's objective because morality is based upon what is morally true, which will always point towards the best possible outcome for the individual. It's not subjective in her mind because the endpoint is basically survival of that individual, and if the individual is dead, then the most irrational thing for an individual, that would be the most irrational thing for an individual. Jordan Peterson has very similar ideas when asked about truth.
Sounds like what you're saying is that truth is as much about action as it is about some sort of material, measurable, objective reality.
No, I'm saying it's more about action.
More about.
Oh yes, yes. The fundamentals of truth are those that guide action, and then the objective science is nested inside that. It has to be.
Right.
There's no way around that. There's only one way you can define truth in relationship to finite beings. It's true enough. True enough for what? True enough so that you survive and reproduce. That's it. You don't get to go any farther. What's more true than that? Sorry, can't ask that question. That's it. You've hit the limit. And
hopefully, I've provided a basic understanding of this concept of game theory, because in my next video, I'm going to dive into Ayn Rand's philosophy, and being a rational actor is pivotal to understanding her premise. Thanks for listening, guys.